here I am, March 1st, 2 months into 2024, about a month and a half into my, about a month into my 2024 book blanket project. I'm just going to update this video, kind of just saying where I'm at, what I've done, some interesting trends, not trends, but things that I have found out since I've started this project. So go ahead, grab your own crochet project, crochet with me as we kind of just chat about my book blanket. So a quick recap. I decided to do a book blanket for kind of an ongoing project throughout 2024. Instead of doing a temperature blanket, I'm tracking the books that I've read and how much I have enjoyed them throughout the year of 2024. I have a whole video talking about my reasonings, my goals, my thought processes, and how I kind of thought through this project. And now it's been about a month of me making it and really tracking what books I've done. And I've noticed some interesting trends with this, unlike how I'm approaching reading since starting this project. But first, some of the logistical things. At the time of my last video, I didn't have all of my colors finalized for this project. But I finally bit the bullet, bought the yarn. I was second guessing myself on the type of yarn, the colors, etc. But I got them, got started. No regrets with the colors. One regret, but minor, not a big one. I decided to have, I have an envelope that's just kind of keeping track of my yarn and what each color represents. Shoved a crochet hook through to tie it on. It works. It's crude, but it's effective. So my colors are, teal is going to be at the end of every, teal is the color I use at the end of every book to separate the books and rate them out of 3 rows. 3 out of 3 rows. Cannot stop thinking about it. When I'm not reading it or listening to the audiobook, I want to go back to it. I need to know what happens. 2 out of 3 stars is when I'm like, I enjoyed the book. It was enjoyable while I was with it. Not thinking about it a ton after the fact, not thinking about it a ton when I wasn't reading it or actively listening to the audiobook, but still enjoyable. And 1 out of 3 stars, probably like good enough to finish. That's kind of how I'm classifying my 1 out of 3 stars. I find those are kind of the broad ranges of how I rate my books anyway, so I might as well apply it to, the yarn. So end of every book row, or I will put a teal to separate the books. Next, I've got, going top to bottom, no real rhyme or reason, I've got Eggplant, which is my high fantasy books. Thistle, this lighter purple, this isn't the most effective way to show you, is my low fantasy. Storm is nonfiction. We've got Sea Glass. Sea Glass is my realistic fiction. Rose is science fiction. Audiobooks, I'm including a row if I do audiobooks, and that's in Charcoal. Darker than I thought. Charcoal and Navy are very close when they're side by side. Hard to tell them apart. That's one of my regrets. On colors, Navy are for books that are classified as adult books. And then this Peacock is my young adult. Now, I did mention one of the regrets. Navy and Charcoal, super close when they're side by side. Hard to distinguish them. And I don't know how well you can see this, but on a blanket, figure it out. Peacock and teal are very close to one another, and they look almost the same. So I wish I had kind of differentiated those colors a little bit more. But overall, I'm still really happy with how the colors are looking once they all come together. So I have that in this basket. It's a random storage one I had for my daughter's clothes when she was younger. And then I have all of the yarn just shoved in. I didn't wind it. I just pull out from the center pulls. And that way I don't have to be messing with loose yarn in a basket or anything. It's all in a nice organized spot to grab as needed. A couple interesting things, trends, I keep saying trends, but some of the trends that I've kind of noticed since I've started this project is I'm much more rigorous and intentional about reading. Typically, if I'm driving to work or cooking dinner, doing laundry, washing dishes, I listen to music, I'll have the radio on, or I'll like pull up a YouTube video if I'm like in the kitchen. But since doing this project, I've really gotten into audiobooks, which I have done. I have had that interest in the past, but not consistently. But I am doing an audiobook kind of almost constantly where I'll listen to it when I've got some downtime instead of scrolling through my phone or just playing a YouTube video, which is kind of, it's nice. I wish I could read more, but audiobooks still are fun, interesting, and engaging. So I've really increased on that. I've also like increased the speed on the playback for audiobooks. So I'm getting through a lot more books than I typically do because in a normal year. And a big part of that is the motivation for this blanket. I want books. I want to make sure I'm not just having, a dish towel size by the end of the year and just like not a usable blanket for me for next year when I'm curling up reading more blankets. So kind of a fun development that I've noticed. I've also noticed that it's harder for me to give up a book when I'm not enjoying it partway through. So that was something I didn't expect, but I don't know if I'm like project oriented. I need to complete it. I'm already 40 or 60% of the way through a book. I might as well finish it even though I'm not interested on it because I've already spent all this time on it. And that's something I kind of need to stop fixating on. There's one book I haven't worked on it yet. I probably won't talk about it to the next video, but there's one book where I'm like, if it wasn't for this project, I would have not finished it, but it was good enough to finish. By the time I was really over it, I was probably 2 hours away from finishing it on an audiobook, and I was like, I could suck it up for 2 more hours. So that's one thing I don't know, I need to figure out on. There is one book Sapiens, that I listened maybe 30%, and it was enjoyable, but I kind of got bored of it. So I think that might be one I come back to because A, I've already started it, might as well count it towards my book project, but B, I want credit for those pages. So again, not the goal of this project, but kind of a weird side effect that I'm noticing from this project. So my own problem. Here I am the next day working on this blanket and video again. Life happens pretty chaotically around here right now with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So even though I had plans to finish the video, here we are. Next day, my hair drying after a shower because this is the time that I have in order to keep crocheting and giving you all an update. I was talking about books last time I was filming and then got interrupted. So I'm just going to start over again with it just to update you on the books that I have included in my 2024 book blanket. The first book that I read that really motivated me to get my act together and get started with this book blanket was Fourth Wing. I am classifying it as a young adult. I think it would be better classified as a new adult, but I don't have a color for that, so I'm putting it as young adult. I gave that book 3 out of 3 stars. Now, I'm not going to give you a summary of what it's about. There are so many summaries of that book online if you wanted to learn more about that specific book, but I'm just going to say it was a book that, for me, lived up to the hype. There have been a lot of books that get a lot of hype online or from friends that I read, and I'm like, okay, it was good, but not as good as everyone made it out to be. Fourth Wing for me lived up to that hype. I gave it 3 out of 3 stars. Can't stop thinking about it. It was one of those books that I stayed up way later than I should have in order to read it. An hour, 2 hours past when I normally go to sleep. I would still be reading, exhausted, but unable to put the book down. So what a great way to start off 2024. Such a good book. I'm hoping I can find other books that are that riveting and engaging for me. So if you have recommendations, please let me know. The second book that I read was, it was an audiobook, and it was a nonfiction adult audiobook, Brave Not Perfect. One of those self-help books targeted at women and girls, and as a teacher slash parent slash woman, it was just an interesting listen. For me, not the best self-help audiobook I've listened to, but it was decent. It was enjoyable. I gave it 2 out of 3 rows. The third book was another nonfiction adult audiobook that I gave 3 out of 3 rows on. It was called Word Slut. It is a book it was another audiobook for me that I really enjoyed listening to. The author reads it in such a hilarious way. It really brings a topic of linguists and words as what I thought would be a pretty dull topic to life, and I absolutely loved it. Talking about the power of words and language in regard to misogyny, patriarchy, and feminism. Such a fun listen for me. I just met my step goal. Woo, go me. The fourth book that I read was a young adult book, a second in a series that I read last year, and the second book came out recently and I hadn't found time to read it, and it was a young adult, Never a Hero. It was good. It's a low fantasy book, so it could be happening down your street where, we're in our world and all this magical things are happening that us mere mortals could never pick up on. And it was good. I really liked the first book. I think the first book was better in my mind, Only a Monster. But the second book, still pretty good. I gave it 2 out of 3 stars. Not as much of a page turner and thought provoker as the first one was for me, because I kept thinking about it for the first one, but still enjoyable. A nice, easy, exciting, action-packed young adult book for if you ever need something pretty just fun and fast-paced for you. The fifth book that I read this year so far was another audiobook. Like I said before, I am rushing through audiobooks. This one was Marion Lane and the Midnight Murder. It takes place in post-World War II England, looking at, it's a realistic fiction, a mystery about this undercover crime-fighting detective agency that works underground. Again, another good one. It wasn't a 3 out of 3 for me. For me, I gave it 2 out of 3 rows because it was enjoyable. I enjoyed it while I was listening to it, but nothing to really rant and rave about to my friends and say, you have to read this book. Now, the last book I'm going to talk about is the book that I am working on right now. It was another audiobook, and it was a science fiction young adult called Crown Chasers. I realized with making this blanket that I don't read a lot of science fiction, and I have this bright pink, this rose color that I just felt needed to be worked in somehow. So that's honestly the motivation for me looking for a science fiction, and I was so happily excited with Crown Chasers. I need to go listen to the second book on audio. It's one I think I would do an audiobook again on because the narrator just did it so well and did the sass and sarcasm of the characters in such a fun way that I would definitely listen to it again. It's a good one with spaceships, action, fighting, wit, sarcasm, and just a fun overall listen / it would be great as a book as well. So that is the one I am finishing up on right now. I'm almost done. I'm on the 3rd out of 4 rows for the genre. Then I'm going to make the audiobook young adult rows, and finally 3 out of 3 rows for my first science fiction book of the year. That's all for now for this update. It was just interesting to look at some of the developments that have happened since starting this project with how I approach reading in audiobooks this year. I've also found that I've really gotten that instant gratification of working on this project. The moss stitch, I don't think I mentioned before, was the right call for me for this project. It works up really quickly. I get that enjoyment out of crochet. It's something I could put down and come back to as needed. If you are thinking about doing your own book blanket, highly recommend. If you just need that project that's quick, you don't have to do daily tracking like a temperature blanket, but you want that long ongoing project you can always turn back to, this is it. Highly, highly recommend. It's fun, and I'm really excited to see what my final product is going to be throughout this year. But thanks for joining me. Let me know if there are any books you think I should read. I'm always looking for book recommendations. Hit that like button, subscribe. Let me know any other tips you might have for continuing on with this project, whether it's for reading or whether it's some tips for this blanket on how it's coming together. But yeah, I guess I'll just see you next time. Bye.